I think the real reason why it is that people got so upset or triggered over this take is because, I don't know, credentials. I mean, this right here is one of the reasons why it is. I'm kind of baffled why it is that people got upset that Pat McAfee just simply called out his team.
In a red zone, in a game that you need to win. And he says, I was tired. That's all. And it's like inside voices don't need to say that. The fact that you think you could say that leads me to believe that you literally have no awareness of any repercussions of anything. There's no accountability anywhere.
It's not just a failure in culture. It's also a PR failure too, because it makes you wonder how it is that this type of information got out. Okay, now guys, before we talk about this, number one, I want you guys to know that this video right here is primarily going to be about the topic of if you are an actual fan of a team, if you have some actual influence, should you be allowed to actually publicly critique said team? But also at the same time, if you do you have the credentials to do so? But before we get started, I want to go ahead and acknowledge something. There may be a video out tomorrow on the incident that happened in New Orleans. Yes, there was a terrorist incident that happened in New Orleans. I want you guys to please keep everybody in their keep everyone in your thoughts and prayers for the time being, because right now there's a lot of conflicting information out about that. And of course, if I was to do that video there, I would also be explaining to you guys exactly why it is that those types of content, those types of topics will be put on a third channel later on this year, because obviously I'm going to be diving into history, and of course that history is going to be discussing a lot about incidents, things that have happened in this nation's history that, of course, our mainstream media found a way to goof. But we don't have that much information on the situation at this moment in time. So for the time being, I'm going to kind of sit back and wait before I talk about said incident in New Orleans that happened on New Year's Day, and also this odd situation in Las Vegas where a Cybertruck blew up and is out in front of Donald Trump's hotel. Now, it's definitely a lot of coincidences here, but you guys know what people say about coincidences. Nothing is an actual coincidence. We may cover that tomorrow as a third video, but right now I have two of them scheduled. With that right there out of the way, let us go ahead and get to this take. So the Indianapolis Colts organization is upset that somebody went on a show and talked about said team. Not the only person it's not the only people who are upset about this, but obviously some people got triggered in the comment section. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, because in this online culture that we have, you can actually hold people and teams accountable if you have the actual right credentials. Now, I want to go ahead and say this right now before we fully dive into this. Pat McAfee, as you guys know, is a former punter in the NFL. He has his own show, he has a massive following, and obviously he is tied to the Indianapolis Colts organization as a season ticket holder, and obviously as a former Colts player. He obviously holds that franchise near and dear to his heart. Never won a Super Bowl with that franchise, etc., etc., etc. But of course, a lot of people have criticized that franchise for a multitude of reasons because, yeah, they found a way to go to New York and lose to what many people believe to be the worst team in the NFL this year, the New York Giants, while they had a potential playoff seat on the line. Now, guys, I'm not a Colts fan. I want to go ahead and say that right now. I am a Green Bay Packers fan, and right now we're looking at possibly being 2-4 or 1-5 as a playoff team against divisional opponents. Very, very odd season that we had, and of course there are also a lot of people out there who think that the other New York team, not the Giants, is actually the worst team in the NFL, that right there being the Jets. But I'm just going to link this video right here from Wi-Fi Willie in the description box, which breaks down that situation absolutely 100% perfectly. I'm also going to be linking this video right here from behind the line in the description box. There's going to be a lot of videos as well as the full segment and the full 2 segments that we're going to be referencing on this topic here. I'm just here to give you guys my thoughts on this situation, and with that right there out of the way, if you guys are new here, please consider subscribing, please cut the notifications on, please hit the like button, and now let's go ahead and get to this. So, now that long part's out of the way, let's go ahead and get this topic. So, things that football teams, not just football teams, but basketball teams, baseball teams, clubs should actually have, organizations, is culture. And that culture, of course, needs to be a winning culture. It needs to be an attractive culture for players to want to sign at said organization. It needs to be an actual winning culture. And it seems to me like a lot of people are triggered because Mr. McAfee decided to criticize the team that he played for's overall culture. I mean, there was this bit earlier in the year where the franchise quarterback, the guy that they drafted in the first round, Anthony Richardson, and yes, I do know he tore his ACL last year, he decided he wanted to quit during a game.
It was bummer to hear Anthony Richardson, a man who has so much potential, so much. I mean, you're talking about being able to throw, 62 yards off his back foot like this into a bucket, being able to run 4.5, 4.4 at 260 pounds, might be 290 right now, who knows, whatever. He is immensely gifted. I mean, it is bananas to think about how great he is. But then you start putting pieces together, start watching things, you see the tap out. That's not the only time he's tapped out of a game with no problems. Happened in his first year, too. If you watch his first 5 games that he played, there's like 2-3 different times where he's off the field. And then what happened medically? Nothing. He's
not exactly the type of behavior that you would want out of your first-round quarterback. Also, to go on top of that, and I mentioned this right before I went off the rails for a second there, you just lost to the New York Giants in Week 17. Worst team in the NFL at this moment in time with a playoff spot on the line. Now, this has kind of sort of been the thing with the Colts over the past few years. I want to say that they had a playoff spot on the line, and they lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars at the very, very end of the year when they probably should have won that game. And, of course, I think they play the Jags this coming week. And, of course, Jags have always found a way to be a spoiler for the Colts at the very, very end of the year. So you can at least go away if you're a Colts fan saying, well, it wasn't the Jags who did it to us, but of course it was the freaking Giants. An organization that for some odd reason chose to invest this year in Daniel Jones, a quarterback that they would eventually cut because he requested to be cut because Daniel Jones actually thought that he was a hot crap quarterback. And of course you guys can obviously see the 2 New York City football teams are both an absolute mess. So McAfee, being a Colts fan, being a very, very influential Colts fan, having his own show, the Pat McAfee Show, where he talks about all kinds of sports, mostly football, he goes on and he basically says this.
Yeah, I mean, that is, and then I'm a part of all their shit, pretty much. All of the Colts stuff. Very much proud of that fact, too. Have a lot of friends in that building, obviously, that have been there a long time. The OGs that I referenced, I would like to see this team get good for them. But the players just have never won. This group of players has never won here. Haven't won the AFC South in 10 years. Haven't won the AFC. Think about how good the AFC South has been for the last 10 years. Great powerhouse.
Yeah.
Tough to win.
One of the best.
But all these guys not all these guys, most of these guys that are on this team have been here for the entirety of it. Chris Ballard, who I think is a good man, okay? He's a very good man, great hair, great accent. He always says, I trust our guys. I trust our guys. He's paid all these guys that have been here for a long time. They still have never won. And then, the whole thing starts happening with me pointing out the tapping out thing of a quarterback on.
The biggest problem with the organization is actually the man he just mentioned, Chris Ballard. But we'll talk about Ballard here in a second. Let's go ahead and get this first part, of course. Let's go ahead and get this part about Anthony Richardson here and, of course, the players in the building. We'll get back to Ballard here in a second, but let's continue. Now, before I talk about that 49-second segment that I played for you guys, I want to go ahead and say this. It all stems from a tweet that he put out that I'll link in the description box for you guys, and I'm not going to read verbatim. You guys know me. I typically tend to not read the article verbatim. I reference the article. I reference what's in the article, and I'll link it in the description box. The reason why is because my reading is absolutely terrible. I mean, yeah, I'll be doing some video essays where I got to read a script, but I'm a little bit better at that than reading a basic article. It's very, very weird. I know I need to work on that. But still, though, the point is this right here. Obviously, people are upset. Colts fans are upset. McAfee being basically the it of the Colt fan base at this moment in time. People are out there saying all kinds of stuff like, who the hell are you to criticize the organization? Who the hell are you to criticize this team? And, of course, there's also the head coach, Shane Steichen, who basically, we'll get to Steichen here in a second because Dan over there at Outkick had a very interesting take on this that we'll be talking about here in a second. But the point is this right here. The culture of that organization is definitely something that needs to be called out. I mean, think about this really quick. You draft a quarterback in the first round. The quarterback goes out there, plays, and then for whatever reason during the game he chooses to quit, which, by the way, was also referenced in this take here.
If he thinks it's okay to just not work hard, which was the reports that came out immediately after the benching, is like he started preparing a lot better. He became the guy who was the first one in. He started becoming a professional after the benching. The OGs had to go talk to him. It's like, well, what had been happening before that moment? And then, obviously, my face gets used as like, hey, this guy's an enemy of the Colts, what the national media is saying. No, everything I said about your team was right. And everything I said about your locker room was right. And you have won nothing. You have won absolutely nothing. I was just a punter. I very much understand that. I saw a lot of people saying this guy's just a punter. Well, if I'm just a punter, I don't know, the view, 10 million views or something like that in a game that you need to win. And he says, I was tired. That's all. And it's like inside voices don't need to say that. The fact that you think you could say that leads me to believe that you literally have no awareness of any repercussions of anything. There's no accountability anywhere.
Okay. Now, if you watch the full 14-minute segment that he put on his show the other day, you will see that Pat McAfee was actually being, how do I say, he was being a little bit nicer than he probably should have been when it comes to the topic of Anthony Richardson. There was also this bit in the tweet where he said that maybe the team should consider starting Joe Flacco over Anthony Richardson. The thing is this right here. If you have a young quarterback and your young quarterback quits on the team during a game, and you can say he got tired or whatever, which, by the way, getting tired is not an excuse to quit during a game, it's not exactly a good example. It doesn't set a good precedent, and if you see your quarterback, the leader of the team, doing this type of stuff, then it might give others the belief that maybe they can sag ass too, put forth no effort. Basically, what Pat McAfee is doing is he's calling out the culture of the team that he is, quite frankly, associated with, the team that he played for. And, of course, he's also a pretty influential fan. I did mention it before. And, of course, he also played the game. Yes, I know McAfee is a punter, but still. The point is the Indianapolis Colts have got a serious problem with their overall culture. I mean, look, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but it seems to me like my team, the Packers, may have actually gotten things together. By the way, keep the Packers in mind because I'm going to be bringing them up at the very end of the video because I have a feeling that something is going to be happening with a former Packer who's connected to McAfee and the Colts too. But we'll get to that here in a second. The fact of the matter is that the culture of the Indianapolis Colts is not exactly a good culture. Now, who do I find responsible for this? Well, it's the guy that you guys are seeing right in the B-roll footage, General Manager Chris Ballard. Yes, I am saying that Chris Ballard is the real problem there in Indianapolis, and here is the reason why I say that. It's because the guy is, quite frankly, a complete total tool bag. Go back to what McAfee said. He signed all these people. He got these people paid even knowing that they had some issues. And while McAfee was trying to be nice about the entire situation, one would automatically kind of think to themselves that Chris Ballard is, for the most part, kept around because Jim Irsay needs somebody to laugh at. That's really the only reason why it is that I think that Chris Ballard is even with the organization. But you also had the situation, and McAfee touched on this right too, with the running back Jonathan Taylor. Now, the reason why I bring up Jonathan Taylor is because Jonathan Taylor obviously wanted to get paid. And, of course, running backs typically tend not to get paid the way they want to get paid because running backs are oftentimes used to are thought of to be expendable players. That right there is what they're thought of. It's a pretty crap old job when you think about it because you're putting yourself at massive risk for the team, especially being a running back, especially being a running back on a team that does not have a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. You're having to carry the team. And, of course, at that time, you could argue that Taylor was, in fact, carrying the team. So maybe he should have gotten paid. That situation right there I thought was a failure, not so much on Jonathan Taylor's end, but more of a failure on Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay's end. And normally I would take the side of ownership, but if the player really and truly has been carrying you, then yeah. I think that the way they handle that, I think, is kind of trickling down to the rest of the locker room. And, of course, the locker room itself is looking at this, and they're saying this organization has got no focus. And then, of course, you've got the head coach, Shane Steichen. Now, I'll get to Shane Steichen here in a second. But like I said before, it kind of goes back to the whole, does this guy have a right to call out the culture and use his platform to call out the culture of the organization that he is a season ticket holder of? Well, in McAfee's case, I would say yes. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's just say you're Ben Roethlisberger, okay, former quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. You've got experience in the game, and let's just say the Steelers have sucked for a very long time. Now, I'm not saying that Ben Roethlisberger would do this, but of course, if he's got a massive platform and he's got a show like Pat McAfee, if he calls out the culture of the team, then quite frankly, I don't see a problem with that. Terry Bradshaw does that crap every Sunday on Fox Sports, and Terry Bradshaw's takes have gotten worse and worse and worse. If you're a commentator, this is obviously your job is to commentate on teams, especially if it is a team that you are associated with. Shannon Sharp, for many years on Fox Sports, he called out the Denver Broncos, very, very much personally involved in that. Skip Bayless, a guy who, quite frankly, I've never thought was actually credible, but has obviously been in the business for a very, very long time and been a Dallas Cowboys fan for a very, very long time, always called out his team. Obviously, he had the ability to do so. Now, the question then becomes about, is he a pundit? Well, pundits obviously do what pundits do, but in McAfee's case, he's got a massive following. So maybe the thinking here is that maybe Pat McAfee might be a little bit more influential. Just think about that for a second before we get to the end of the video. Just kind of ponder that. But then we get head coach Shane Steichen. Now, guys, I got this bit right here from Outkick, and I think Dan had a pretty good take, which, like I said, I think will be linked in the description box of this video here. It makes you wonder why it is this issue of players being late, and what you guys heard earlier is even really and truly an issue, and why it's being brought to the public eye. But let me roll this.
Shane, I don't know if you saw Pat McAfee's post-game tweet or if you were made aware of it, but he talked about players showing up late for treatment, for meetings. He wondered about the accountability. Is that true? Buck suggested that it was an issue at times throughout the season.
Yeah, I think with any team, right, not everyone's going to be on time every time, but there is accountability, and guys are held to a standard, and that is talked about in-house. And I don't think that. And I think, with anything, I think Pat, he's a former alumni that wants to see the Colts do well, just like all our fans want us to do well. And when the standard isn't, not getting in the playoffs, it's frustrating. So it's frustrating for a lot of people, myself included. And that's why we talk about the standard just being raised so we're not, in these situations.
Yeah. It's not just a failure inside the clubhouse. It's obviously a failure as in the PR firm. McAfee, to tell you the truth, probably should not have access to this information, but still at the same time, journalists and people leak stuff out. But I also think that the response that Steichen had was in a lot of ways, well, I'll let Dan kind of explain this a little bit here, and I'll come back in and add the rest.
Yeah, what a bullshit answer. No, not right. He said, every team has players late, right? No, I got to tell you something. Now, I got to Indiana basketball when Bob Knight had been there 8 years, I think. I think he got there in 72. I got there in 81, so maybe it was 9 years he had been there. The culture had been established. And I was there 16 years before I left, and I went to Bowling Green. In those 16 years, I never saw a player late. Maybe. It is so big that you bring that up. Think about this. I've got a lot of guys here. Dylan, maybe he's a Titans fan. Maybe Nick are New York fans. I don't know. But I want you to think about this. When's the last time that has ever been brought up? I don't remember it. Usually what happens is a new coach comes in, like Steichen did for Tom Allen, and he's got to clean things up. And sometimes that coach will say it publicly that he had to do it. Most times, coaches won't. Most times, coaches will just do it out of respect for the previous coach. But this has been amazing, and they took on the wrong guy in Pat McAfee. Zaire Franklin, E.J. Speed, the linebackers, have a podcast, and they're really stupid guys, and they've been exposed as stupid. And that's hard for me to say because I really think that NFL guys are smart.
Now, obviously, I chose to play the clip that I chose to open this video up with again. The reason why I chose to do that is because that right there is what's going on here. Look, if a team has got problems, a team has got problems. No team is perfect, okay? But the mere fact that the local media, the mere fact that you've got somebody who's a public figure who's tied to the team or is tied to the team in whichever way you might think that he would be as a former player, as a fan, as a season ticket holder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It, to me, speaks of, how do I say, the emperor's got no clothes in the city of Indianapolis. I don't think Jim Irsay knows what the hell is going on, and I think Jim Irsay is probably he's probably flipping out right now, wondering what the hell to do. But he's also looking at Chris Ballard, saying, "How the hell did this information get out?" And Chris Ballard's doing what Chris Ballard normally does with that extremely dumb sounding accent of his and that very, very dumb facial expression that he always has. And of course, he's trying to find whatever way he can to make Jim Irsay laugh, so that way he won't get fired. But still, and guys, I'm not in no way, shape, or form criticizing a football team. I am criticizing the ownership and the culture that Mr. McAfee is calling out. So yes, I do believe that someone like Pat McAfee in this case is actually correct to call out the organization and even to a certain degree use his platform, because he is obviously a former player. And while it was a punter, it doesn't matter. The guy is going to the Hall of Fame, obviously, for a reason. Which leads me to one more final thing. And this is something that I touched on earlier with the situation in New Orleans. The video on that situation I'll probably have out tomorrow, regardless of what the information is, to kind of notify you guys of what happened in detail and give you guys my thoughts on it. But the reason why I'm creating that third channel is designed for incidents like what happened here. I don't like talking about incidents, terrorist incidents that happened the day of. The reason why is because we don't have all the facts. I want to give it some time. I want to let things kind of materialize, and I would like to put that in an actual historical form video. With that right there being said, right now at this moment in time, the only other video that's scheduled for tomorrow is this situation involving the WNBA, and obviously what happened in New Orleans could be coming up tomorrow in video number 3. It may be a 3-day video, just giving you guys a heads up. I didn't want to start the year out that way, but once again, here we are. And of course, also, if you haven't posted for a while, you're definitely going to be throwing additional videos out there for algorithmic purposes. With that right there being said, please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign off in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.